Hey everybody, in this video I will show you why I believe domestic dog culture is evolving dogs backwards in a way that is very dangerous to us. So first, let's go over to this brain headquarters place. So I just wanted to show you that scientific community knows that your brain continues to make new neurons throughout your mental activities throughout your life. But this is based on your lifestyle and other things in your life. So there's this thing called use it or lose it. So if you use a certain part of your brain, that is the brain part that gets more blood, more oxygen, more nutrients, more upstream and downstream hormonal signaling. There's all kinds of interesting stuff about this. People's brains actually gain weight over time from adjusting habits and nutrition. So if you don't use part of your brain, that part of your brain can lose mass and lose ability. And I just wanted to share this little article with you because it explains about how some of this works. And so our brains have two different hemispheres, the left and the right. And if you only use one of your hemispheres more than the other one, that hemisphere will become more habitually the one that becomes part of all of your decision making and other stuff. And they've proven this to be true with dogs, not just humans. So here's a little article from, I believe, 2016. So this article explains how they imaged the brains of dogs and discovered that when you talk to a dog in a way that indicates you're giving the dog a resource, you are constantly activating the left hemisphere of the brain. And the left hemisphere of the brain is the one that's reactive, the one that is very, very narrow focused and not really aware or caring about anything in the outside environment, oftentimes to the point of injury or injuring other people and animals around you. But have a look at this article. This has a lot to do with our next slide that I have coming up. So next, I want to invite you to watch this video in its whole, but let me share a few seconds of it. So this is from the studies of Mcgilchrist, and it's very fascinating, and it really makes sense. Like if you've ever known a left-handed person or a right-handed person and noticed their different behaviors.
Primary difference between the two hemispheres, it is helpful to examine a fundamental problem that all creatures face in the struggle to survive. We must eat, while also protecting ourselves from being eaten. In his book The Matter with Things, Mcgilchrist provides the example of a bird to show how the bipartite nature of the brain helps to solve this fundamental problem of survival. When a bird is searching for food, it must deploy a narrow, focused, and precise attention to find and attack the worms and bugs it eats. But if a bird only deployed this narrow attention, its survival fitness would be low, as every time it focused on finding food, it would be oblivious to its surroundings and easy prey for predators.
So this reminds me of the way domestic dogs treat little children. Focused attention. Not just little children, anybody. When you walk into a dog owner's house, when you get close to a dog owner, the dog is heavily, heavily focused on your pants pockets, your hands, jumping in your face, jumping up on the couch to get food from you. Food, 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 resource, resource, resource. Super narrow focus, heavily relying on that one side of the brain, the narrow focus, and not using the wide focus part of the brain.
To solve this problem, a bird simultaneously deploys a more open, broad, and sustained attention to monitor its surroundings and to be on the lookout for potential threats.
Okay, so modern dog culture, we remove those threats. A dog doesn't have to really worry about threats. Everything is going to get handed to the dog. If you go back about a decade or two, it was common for adult humans that had little toddlers, if the dog got too close to the toddler, adults would grab that dog by the neck and give it a good hard swat on the nose. Because a decade or so ago, humans understood that dogs are very dangerous to toddlers. And so the dog would get a swat on the face and the dog would be fine, but that would activate the other hemisphere of the dog's brain, the right side. And the dog would start to understand that, hey, okay, that's a danger. I don't go over there and take food from the toddler. And that's how it would happen in nature. Like with the our little bird guy right here. This bird and his grandparents and everybody else, they've probably been attacked by other predators when trying to get food, so they change their behavior and they don't do certain things when they're getting their food. But with dogs, we're not doing that. We're allowing dogs to rely on only one lobe of their brain because we take away their predators and we give them all the resources.
The simultaneous deployment of two types of attention was made possible by the evolution of the two brain hemispheres, or as Mcgilchrist writes, how on earth can you dispose your consciousness towards the world in two conflicting ways at once? The answer is the evolution of two neuronal masses, separate enough to function independently, but connected enough to work in concert with one another, each capable of sustaining consciousness on its own. In other words, a bipartite brain. In the bipartite brain, the left hemisphere specializes in the narrow and precisely focused attention that is necessary to obtain the resources needed to survive.
Yep, narrow attention, resources to survive. Look at the way dogs act around little kids. Like a perfect example is if you start looking at pit bull attacks, the way that they attack toddlers, the way that they attack when the toddler cries, and there is no repercussions for these pit bulls. Sometimes they get shot by police, but typically the pit bull dogs will constantly bite and nip and cause problems, but there is no other part of the hemisphere picking up these little learning procedures of, hey, don't do that. My owner is going to grab me by the collar and jerk me away from that toddler. So we're giving these dogs all of the blood, all of the oxygen to that narrow focus part of their brain. And if you step away from the toddler attacks part of this, you can see this in every other dog. The way that they bark, the way that they run up, the way that people with dogs will always say, oh, every time I open up a bag of chips, all my dogs come running. Yes, because they hear that sound and that just activates that one hemisphere of their brain and they're going to jump up on the couch, jump up on the counter. And back in the day, if a dog did that, they would probably get a smack on the nose and be like, no, this isn't your food, this is human food. But the way we do it today, we actually promote that type of activity from dogs. And the study that I showed you earlier proves this. They talk about different types of words and sounds, like saying good boy, and it activates that narrow left side of the brain. So when a dog hears you open the fridge, crack open a soda pop, open up a bag of Cheetos or whatever, that's activating that resource gimme, 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 gimme part of the brain. And then they come running. They crash through the door, they trip over the couch, they break stuff in your house because they have no focus and understanding of what's around them because they're just relying on that side of the brain. So if a dog actually lived in nature, nature would punish the dog for doing stuff it's not supposed to do. It would get bitten by the mother, like this picture right here. Or like this picture right here. This dog might have been fighting with the other ones or squealing too much, and the other dog, gives it a quote unquote correction. And that's going to get stored in that right side of the dog's brain, and it's going to learn that it shouldn't do that because that equals pain. Here's a really good example from the natural world of dogs. This video, these little puppies, they're greedy little resource grabbing little puppies. They're running around trying to get milk from the mother. And so she's going to give them a little bit of pain. She's going to give them a little bit of that right brain learning. Now, she growls at him a little bit more than I'm going to show you here, and she chases him away from her. But you see, they actually learn something. Even though these dogs are pretty dumb, they don't have a proper prefrontal lobe. That side of their brain that stores the information that tells them, don't be messing with mom, quit grabbing all these resources, go over here and frickin' wait. They actually learn that. But we as humans, we don't do that with dogs. We don't put our dogs aside and tell them to leave us alone. We allow them up everywhere, on our tables, in our restaurants, in our schools, inside of the bedrooms with our children that get mauled by dogs. And so that's robbing the actual natural part of the dog, that right brain that learns from a little bit of pain, that learns from consequences. So, for one thing, it's dangerous for us. It's dangerous for the dogs because you're unnaturally evolving them backwards. And then people that live with dogs, they are going to emulate this brain pathology. Just look at the way dog owners act. They're crazy reactive. They constantly need dopamine, attention. Look at my dog. Let my dog go more and more and more places that dogs normally wouldn't go. Airplanes, restaurants, at the parks, even though we got more and more dog parks everywhere. So inside of the brain of this dog, there's that one hemisphere that learns from having consequences. And notice it even says here, self-control and patience will be rewarded. This reminds me of a long time ago. My family had German Shepherds. They lived outside in a dog house. And if I went outside with a sandwich or a bag of chips, the dog would just sit back there in the doghouse looking at me. It could smell the chips. It could smell the Subway sandwich if I had one, but it wouldn't run up and jump on me, because if it did, I would push it down or I would just go in the house. The dog would sit there and be patient and wait. And that's that right side of the brain that we are basically evolving out of all of these domestic dogs by the way that we spoil them. If you do a quick research on dog seizures, you'll find that these seizures are increasing in dogs. So could that be linked to the fact that we don't let the dog actually use that right side of its brain where it picks up all that negative reinforcement? Because think about it, in the past few years, everybody pushes this positive reinforcement, constantly rewarding the dog, which means you're going to get a dog that's basically running around trying to get a reward instead of a dog that can actually store a lot of that negative reinforcement in its right brain. So the left brain of the dog is where all the blood, oxygen, and nutrients is going. And this rings true out in society too. Look at all the pit bull attacks where it's like the dog is 8 years old and then it freaking snapped. These dogs also have brain decline. So if they're not using that part of their brain that gets activated with negative reinforcement, then at some point that part of the brain is going to basically atrophy. The dog is just going to be relying on constant resource guarding type behaviors because it's only in the left side of its brain. So what do you think? Does this make any sense? We know that the brain has two hemispheres. We know that the hemispheres work differently, but they are also supposed to work together. And we know that if you don't use certain parts of your brain, those parts will slowly not get as much of the repair that your body can do. And we know if you use another part of your brain, that part of the brain will get more repair that your body can do. So it seems to me that more and more we are just in our left brain. We're in the analysis, logic, facts, math, training, structured behavior, but we're not connecting with all of this stuff. The intuition, the wide thinking. The left brain is all about analysis, which is fine, but it's only analysis right there in the moment. Like every time a dog attack happens, do the people look forwards and backwards and realize that it was because the dog was present? No, they look right there at this analysis and logic within that narrow focus. Remember, it's the left brain is a narrow focus for survival. And so they always look at it through a narrow focus. Like, we got to figure out what could have triggered the dog. We got to figure out what the toddler did. We got to figure out why the babysitter walked out of the door for 5 minutes. So that has been our look at the brain of the dog and how it looks like we're basically ignoring this side of the brain of the dog, and what are the downstream effects of all this on humanity.